back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. I'm your host, Wakanja Hade. Hey, we have a special report from Jamie Edwards. Jamie is talking to Jamie Becker-Finn, State Representative.
Bonjour. I'm here with Representative Jamie Becker-Finn. Jamie is a descendant of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe and one of the leading advocates on behalf of Indian issues here at the Capitol. Welcome, Jamie.
Glad to be talking with you.
So how are things going this session for you?
Well, it's so the Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan, is a good friend of mine.
Yes.
So it's a little bit different having a sister in the executive branch,
yes.
And then we're in the majority this session. This is my first session in the majority. So
completely different vibe.
It is.
You make sure that you get your bills heard.
Yep.
You got preferred seating.
Actually, so when you have the majority, you end up having to have some seats on the opposite party's side. So I actually sit on the Republican side because we spill over onto that side of the chamber. So.
Interesting, because your numbers have increased.
Yeah.
So there was
I can see what's on all their computer screens because they're sitting in front of me.
So, and what an amazing thing. Your colleague and good friend is now Lieutenant Governor, and she's also just happens to be the highest ranked constitutional officer in the country who's an American Indian person. So that's awesome. Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Peggy, great that she was able to.
Always love for Peggy.
Yes. And so, I think what we can hope for, someone who works for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and I know you're working on a variety of issues, we can hope for a lot of good things to come out of that for Indian people.
Absolutely.
So the administration definitely I know they just adopted a new executive order on relationship with tribal governments, and so I'm super excited about that. So let me ask, how did you get involved in politics?
So I grew up in Cass Lake, grew up on the Leech Lake Res, and my dad was really active in local politics, and so it just kind of came naturally. And I worked at the legislature in 2005 to 2007. That was kind of my first real job after college, and so it was just not a thing that was ever really intimidating to me. And so I talk a lot about kind of demystifying what it is that we do here, because it really is not. It's just a job. It's just kind of a weird job.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned your dad, who was very involved, but your dad was also a legislator.
Yes. Yep.
And so he served from.
He served 2 terms in the Senate. He was actually the first Native senator in Minnesota.
Nice. So you were one of those young people who was out door knocking and
parades. Rural Minnesota, it's all about the parades.
Up in the Cass Lake area, and then that Senate district. What was the area of that Senate district?
So it was so it was most of Leech Lake, but it also included Bemidji and Park Rapids, and Science. Definitely not just the reservation. So,
nice.
And I can definitely, now that I myself have been more involved directly in electoral politics, I really think a lot about how kind of revolutionary that probably was in the early 90s for a Native man from rural Minnesota to win a Senate seat. That would be very difficult even to do now. So I think that says a lot about what you can do when you're actually speaking directly to Native folks instead of just assuming we're going to show up and vote.
So you grew up on the Cass Lake Reservation, so that means you've got family and friends who call you all the time. I'm sure from up north, and like, what's going on at the legislature these days?
That happens after you graduate from law school.
Okay, got you.
Luckily, I have another cousin who's an attorney, so it kind of splits the calls and the questions about, hey.
How can you help me out with this issue?
We're always helping people out.
You got those cousins, in Indian country, your cousins are going to come calling. So. But so that's good, though. You were able to have that background experience and exposure to the legislative process, and so that probably helped out a lot as you kind of launched your own campaign, and now you're suburban Indian.
I know.
I know Peggy talks about that before she was successfully elected as lieutenant governor, she talked about being a part of that suburban Indian country constituency.
Well, it's like we always say, we're everywhere.
Yes.
So that's kind of the thing we're always reminding folks, and especially the last 2 years, we had a 4-person Native Women Indigenous Caucus with Susan Allen and then Mary Kunish Pudding, who I still serve with.
Yes.
She also represents the suburbs, so it's. But yeah, we're always kind of reminding people like we don't all look like the Washington football team logo, and we're still here. We're always going to be here.
The Washington football team logo is Lakota or probably Lakota people, right? It seems to dominate. As Ojibwe, I'm admiring your dress here. I was thinking about my daughter would really dig that. I saw a woman when I was out at the UN who had a really cool jacket that had woodland design. And to your point, headdresses. Some of our elders have adopted that. But that's not really that's not really how we roll, so to speak. And that unfortunately that ignorance predominates. So how do you navigate through that? Where I'm sure people come to you and they're you're going to be the person who solves all the Indian issues. No matter what particular community. And I know there are things and issues that can be solved that affect Indian people. It's not really related to your tribal affiliation, but as someone who's connected to a Ojibwe community, there's certain protocols and more unique approaches to things. So how do you handle that? Being the go-to Indian person.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of educating, and it's really kind of amazing the depth to the ignorance that some people in these buildings have, as far as you even see people introducing bills now where they clearly don't even understand the makeup of our Ojibwe nations in Minnesota. They don't understand, why did you leave Red Lake out of this? It's like, oh, no, you don't. So there's just that base level understanding that's clear to me that folks, the average Minnesotan, probably doesn't have. One thing that's been really helpful the whole time I've been in office is that we've had the Posse Caucus, the People of Color and Indigenous Caucus.
Nice.
And the great thing about that has really been that we kind of have each other's backs, even though we come from all kinds of different backgrounds. So, so I know that if there's something happening that's affecting the Native community, that if I'm not in that room, I know that Representative Fooley is going to fill me in about what happened, even though he comes from the Hmong community. It goes both ways. So it's things like that are really helpful, where we kind of are looking out for each other and have each other's backs, even though we're obviously all very, very different, but share kind of the ways we've been treated throughout history and the way that some of the laws affect our people. So that's been I can't imagine doing this job without the Posse Caucus.
I'm sure there's both frustration and also for you, opportunities to educate, which it seems like we're always educating. Right? It's like the burden of being a Shanab and in a dominant society government system. But, just the protocols of, different tribal communities, so Leech Lake, Mille Lacs are part of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe,
right?
And they make decisions from a TEC perspective, right. But each of the bands is autonomous, and MCP doesn't speak for the individual band. So I'm sure you're able to help colleagues and others kind of through what that protocol is.
Right. Well, and actually, a great example of that is this year I'm carrying the DNR. It's called the Lands Bill. So every year there's a bill that deals with different land issues, and essentially the way our law is set up is that if there are land sales or purchases by the Department of Natural Resources that are on water, those have to be approved by the legislature. And so it has all these various provisions from all over the state, but this year we also have a provision that clarifies that if there is public land going up for sale that's within reservation boundaries, that we will give that tribe right of first refusal to purchase that land from the state. And that, I actually worked with, another Native woman attorney who works with some of the tribes to make sure we kind of finesse that language. Nice. But it involved a lot of questions about how come you're calling out, because we had to clarify that it was more important that, for example, that if it's within White Earth's boundaries, that White Earth would have first refusal, not MCT.
Yes.
But like trying to explain that to like the average person, I think a lot of folks are kind of like, well, if you say so. We're going to assume Jamie knows what she's talking about, but
which that's a burden in and of itself. Right? All of those questions then come to you, but it's also a responsibility. And I in talking with you before, I know that's a responsibility you take very seriously. So let me ask in closing. I got one more question for you. I know you got to get back on the floor. You're debating a lot of issues. What would you like to say to young Anishinaabe who may be interested in following in your footsteps and getting into this political arena?
Yeah, absolutely. These buildings and these places belong to you just as much as they belong to anybody else. Like, you have just as much right to be in this state capitol and have access to your representatives and senators as someone who's paid to be here. And so, again, kind of what I said at the beginning, like, you could do this. It's within the realm of possibility, and it's like, it isn't like you have to be some special person or some rich person, or, if it's your dream and you're willing to put in the work, it can happen. And I know there are folks like myself and the lieutenant governor that are more than happy to meet with young folks. My favorite thing is when kids are here in the Capitol and asking questions, and sometimes they ask the hardest questions. Especially
is there a television show?
Kids ask.
Is there a couple of them, right?
Like I've even had conversations with my 8-year-old about the sculpture that is in the House chambers. Like, he was really excited. There was like a Native guy up there, but then we were like, why is he so skinny? There's like all these kind of questions, and
how come he doesn't have that?
Exactly.
I'm sporting one of those these days.
Yep. So, but I think just like making it clear that you are welcome here, and the best way to get past being intimidated by it is to come here.
Yes.
And whether that's like local level or whatever. I think it is important to have folks both working within our tribal governments and our state governments so that our people's voices and perspectives can be heard kind of across the board.
All right. Well, hey, Chi Miigwech for taking time to visit with me today. And
Pini Gigi at Jamie Edwards for your interview of State Representative Jamie Becker-Finn. You're listening to Native Roots Radio on Awake, and we'll be right back.